Thank you.
Okay, I think this talk kind of repeats much of what has been said earlier in the morning. So I can be quick and we can continue the discussion that we had in the morning, talking about human gene editing and the ethical implications of all that. So why the issue is controversial? Much has been said. I think there is something new that has not been covered in some of the points here concerning germline intervention. We've been talking, John has talked about this, about playing God. So the big question for us, of course, is scientists playing God. And what's wrong with playing God? I mean, it has been talked as if playing God is by itself is wrong, but has not been demonstrated, at least to be sufficiently why playing God is bad. Somsak has said yesterday, he, as most Thai people, is a Buddhist, and he found this baffling why Westerners or philosophers, bioethicists, many of whom, at least, have been trained in the West, talk about God. So he found that a bit baffling, if we remember what he talked about yesterday. I think the idea is that Buddhism doesn't have a God. I mean, there are gods, many of them. In the teaching of Buddhism, Chulalongkorn can teach us very well about that. They live in heaven, but they are not the same as the Christian or Islam God. Completely different, because the gods in heaven, they are born, they live for a very long time, like 100,000 years or more. But that time is finite. Depending on the merit they have, after perhaps 100,000 years they die. They vanish from heaven and they are born again as us human beings or other forms. So we can talk about the point of playing God and differences in the how different religions view that. That would be a fine paper. However, we are talking about germline intervention. Perhaps what makes this ethically problematic is that the germline stays forever. Once you change the composition of somebody's gene, and that change, that composition is in the germline, meaning it can be inherited by their children, then in a way the germline, the change composition stays forever, getting passed down through the generations. Given, of course, that there are offsprings, and the offsprings continue to have their own babies. So, if there's something wrong, I think this is what many scientists and philosophers have in mind when they believe that germline intervention is wrong. If there is something wrong, deficient, or harmful, or negative in whatever way, then there is the issue of the gene being inherited down through generations. Then it's difficult to stop that. So it's a version of the precautionary principle in a way. We have to balance the benefits and the costs of the practice germline intervention in this case. But it's very difficult to calculate the benefits. I mean, it's very difficult to calculate the costs because, you know, if there is something wrong with the inherited gene, then there are so many offsprings down into the future, and how I don't see how we can actually, you know, accurately calculate those. So I think this is what many people have in mind. Another problem is about human dignity. This is related to He Jiangui's experiment that, you know, we have been talking about. In China, they seem to have a different conception of human dignity than, you know, I believe in Thailand or in the West. For example, in China, there seems to be less kind of qualm or, you know, the feeling of uneasiness to use a number of people as a means toward achieving certain desired goals. In the West, it's a no-no. In Thailand, you know, the feeling is a bit quite close to the West. We are somehow getting there or on the way, or, you know, things like that. But in China, this is my observation, could be wrong, but I have seen a number of incidences in China which appear to point that way. They are willing, they feel it's okay to use you know, a certain number of people, and they are willing to sacrifice them for the sake of what they believe to be the benefit of the many, or the benefit of the whole, or of the nation, or things like that. And that has a direct bearing on the concept of human dignity, right? Because as Kant has said, human being must never be used as means. It can always and must be regarded as an end in themselves only, and this is a kind of a unnegotiable point in Kant, and if we follow that, then we see his point. But in the East and in China, they don't have the same ethical system as they have in the West, and so it's a bit difficult to you know, compare Kantian ethics to the system of ethics that they have in China, for example. So when the girls, I mean He Jiangui's girls, I mean they have been born, we know that. That's that's why so many people are you know, feeling very, very uneasy about all this, because it's one thing for Professor He to talk about what he intends to do in the future, and it's another thing completely to have the facts, you know, already established, already done, completed experiment. The babies have been born, and then he talked about it in the past tense. Like, I did this experiment, so people were shocked, of course, you know, because the babies have been born. We cannot turn back the clock. We cannot just put the baby back, you know.
Right.
They are here, so problem is what to do with them. And we can imagine a situation, hard to think in China, but we can imagine if there were Europeans and they grow up, right, and they demand to know how they came to be, how they were born, and under what circumstances, and we can imagine they say, these girls, who asked for my consent before doing this experiment on me, so that I was born like with my gene intentionally edited by Professor He's team. I mean, I did not give any consent. Of course, I could not, because I a lot of conceptual problems, right? I could not have given my consent. But in that case, the experiment cannot be performed, because the person who is concerned, who is involved in this, and in the girls, at that stage, they are only embryos. They cannot give any consent. So, is that a good argument? I don't know. But we can. I believe that the issue of consent can become a big issue later on. So, last point, Dr. He said. Sorry, the letters are a bit small. Dr. He, last point, said. He talked about the benefits to the girls, and that is his motivation why he did the experiment. He said that this would prevent the girls from getting HIV, which would have been inherited by them had the experiment not been performed, because their parents, I don't know, the father or mother had HIV, so there's a strong chance that the girls, the babies will will get the HIV through the parents, and the editing of the germline is supposed to stop that. But those are, unilateral thinking, right? The scientists, I don't know about the parents, the facts are not clear enough whether the parents, the mother and father of the girls, I don't know if they had given consent to Dr. He on behalf of their babies, of course, to perform the experiment. And I remember Prasit, in the morning, said something like, the issue about research ethics review is a bit murky, so I think we can expect the worst, right? Considering also that it's happening in China, so a lot of problems. And another point that here is this: if the controversy had not issued, if the world scientific community had not expressed their, very deep concern about all this, I don't think that Professor He would have been punished as severely as he is right now. I don't know. I don't trust people in China, but of course, there is no evidence. It's only my personal observation. But let's go on. My focus is on the whole issue of research integrity, which I'm doing a project on at the moment. So just read, usually the term research integrity is used in the context of combating research or scientific misconduct, consisting of the three main wrong things, namely fabrication, falsification, and plagiarism. But the fact is not clear, and we can assume that Professor He did not plagiarize any ideas, he did not falsify any of his data, he did not fabricate his data. I mean, we can assume that the girls, the genes of the girls were actually edited, you know. So we can assume that, but still research integrity is very much violated, right? In any case, it is nonetheless clear that he violated, breached all these principles. The possible knowledge, the possible gain in knowledge on how to do germline or gene editing on human beings is offset, I mean, is overwhelmed by the violation of the ethical principles and the possible harm to the girls and principle of human dignity. So, considering this, as I said, weighing of the costs and the benefits, I think we should go toward the conclusion that the cost kind of overwhelm the benefit. Especially if we consider this irreparable harm, as I said, which has already been done to the girls. I mean, we can argue, suppose the girls turn out to be fine, I mean, healthy, perfectly, you know, no inherited disease, no genetic disease whatsoever, you know, they are all okay. And even in that case, the girls can ask the question that I talked about earlier, right? You know, who gave you the consent, you know, and, you know, how is it the case that, you know, there are so many other girls in China and only 2 of us, you know, have the fortune, like good luck, whatever, of, you know, having our genes kind of edited, so, you know, who can give adequate answer to them. So last slide, what should we do? We need international collaboration. I think we are in agreement on this point, knowledge sharing. Not only about how to do germline intervention, whatever, on human beings. I think we do have knowledge, but we also have the knowledge, additional knowledge that, you know, we need to be very careful about all that, and we need to be absolutely clear about the ethical difficulties that will issue and benefit sharing. I think this is applicable to other cases also. And funding support, which has been drying up. And so I think the funding agency, I'm referring this more in my case in Thailand, because you know, most or all of the money for research in bioethics comes from the government through this research agency, public research agency. And in recent years, the policy is such that they would like to fund more research in the hard sciences, you know, engineering, biomedicine, including, you know, what Prasit and Soraj yesterday are doing. So they are getting huge amount of funding, while us in the Department of Philosophy, you know, we are happy to get like 1% or 0.1% of what they are getting. And we need legal mechanisms which, though necessary, they should come out last. I mean, we need to discuss and debate among ourselves, not only bioethicists, but medical doctors, scientists, and when possible, the general public when they know enough of the matter, so that society has a kind of a consensus, and only that can we have a kind of law that everybody agrees on. And then we need efficient, robust, and knowledgeable and effective international review board or ethical review committee. So I think this is all I have to say. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. It's open for questions now, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, Daniel, could you stand up and use the mic, please?
Short question for short presentation. Whether you could expand on the relationship or differences or any other relation you find between bioethics and science ethics.
Oh, good question. Thank you. I think I can give you a straightforward, direct answer. Bioethics is a subset of science ethics. Because bioethics deals with medicine, biotechnology, anything related to either biology or medicine or biotechnology. Whereas science ethics, part of what I'm doing is also about data protection and privacy. And I talk a lot with computer scientists. They are doing software, whatever they are doing. They are manipulating a lot of data, and that is another part. But both of them are included in science ethics or ethics of science, or no matter what you want to call them. So, short answer: bioethics is part of science ethics.
It could be vice versa also.
In what way?
In ways which bioethics should presume science ethics, because you expect that the scientist on which you which work on current issue which cause bioethical dilemmas are committed to general principles of science or discourse or disclosure of knowledge or motivation. But the question is whether science should be subjected to bioethical principles is a question which is another question. So I mean, we could ask questions about technology, and then we think that all scientists should be subjected to general principles like truthfulness. But then you could add also and to bioethical principles. So I'm not sure that which one is the more general term, which one is the sub-topic.
I think I understand your question. For me, bioethics is a special field. When we ask questions that I'm asking here and which others in this meeting have already asked, what's right or wrong with germline intervention in human beings, and we have given all kinds of answers and we have discussed quite a lot. That's bioethics, because we are talking about human genes, and human genes are part of human beings. Human beings are biological organisms, Homo sapiens and whatnot. So that's bioethics. And your point about science being subject to the methodology that respects the truth and agreement of the community by way of what is known as the scientific methodology that is applicable in other fields of science also, including physics or chemistry, right? I can imagine there's ethics of chemistry. Not too many people talk about that, but I believe there is. You do your experiment in your lab, you're doing your chemical reaction and you take care not to make a bomb, that's, and then you take care of the safety of everyone in the lab, and you take care to dispose of your chemical compounds in a proper way. You don't throw them into the sewer or in the toilet, for example. That's ethics. I can call it ethics of chemistry. But both chemists and biologists and medical scientists, they belong to there is this thing vaguely known as the scientific methodology, and people discuss this quite a lot in philosophy of science. What constitutes truth, what constitutes genuine scientific knowledge. But that's a long stuff and we don't have time. But that's my answer.
Can I say one more thing?
Yes, you say two more things.
I'm the first faculty of the now Department of Environmental Studies. It used to be a separate school. The second faculty came a year later, and he is a brilliant researcher doing excellent work on biological engineering. And I have no problems with his research because he's mainly doing all kinds of things with seaweeds, totally environmentally friendly. But when he just came in, he suggested that we work on ethics of bioengineering, and I started reading about it, and I couldn't do it. It was supposed to be our joint research together, because otherwise our topics are rather separate. I couldn't do it because I couldn't presume that bioengineering in general is okay, and we have to have certain ethical rules, because I always had in mind that I don't know what could be done with bioengineering to the general and to the broader environment, to the ecology. And I couldn't think of ways to codify it in any kind of ethics in the narrow sense. And in the broader sense, that's bioethics in the sense of Van Poten. That's why I articulated my question as I did.
Thank you. I think your last point is a comment, so I don't need to answer and respond.
John, please come up.
Just mine's only a short question. So you talked about human dignity, and one speaker this morning said he wasn't quite sure what that was. I have the same feeling. I mean, you sort of raised that partly because people have different views of dignity. Our views of dignity change over time and so on. So I'm not quite sure how much weight you can actually put on that. Now, you spelled it out to some extent in terms of Kant and looking at people in terms of ends and not as means. Yeah, that's the right way around. But, I mean, in everyday life we treat people as means all the time. When I came over here, I was sitting 10k up in the air. the pilots were means to me, they weren't ends.
Yeah.
I mean, if I sat down and had a meal with them, they might be ends, but I think the point really is, I don't know whether he made it like this or not, but is that we don't treat people purely as means, because we have to treat people as means a lot. So I'm not quite sure how much or what sort of, or how you can actually spell out dignity in a way that means we can do a lot with it rather than just sort of a feel-good thing.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'm aware of the literature about, criticisms of the concept of human dignity also. Yes, you are correct that people behave as if they were means to others all the time. We go to the restaurants, the waiters bring us food and so on. They are means by which the food comes to us, right? But they do that for like their wages, or they are being employed by their restaurants. It's not that they are forced to do their job. I mean, they're not slaves. In that case, we can be pretty clear that the slaves are being used as means toward the end. They are not much different from the cows or the horses that people have been using as means. I think that is a difference. It's okay because it happens all the time for someone to voluntarily behaves as means toward another. But I think the key word here is voluntarily. In exchange for wages, or I do many things for my wife, but like I have to pick her up at her work and drive her to her work in the morning and so on. But I don't regard myself as being like as Kant says, as a complete means where my wife is completely above me. I don't think that's the case. It's part of the relationship between two persons that is going on. And how does this bear on my take on the concept of human dignity? That's a big question. I have not thought much about that. What I can answer at the moment is something like this. In Buddhism, there is a text and it's clear that human beings are a bit, not much, but a bit above the animals, in the sense that human beings can be taught. I mean dogs can be taught, but human beings can be taught in a special way, like through understanding and concepts. And only human beings can practice in such a way that they achieve nirvana eventually. Dogs cannot. They have to be born again as human beings before they can become, enlightened. So, in that case, human beings are only a bit, because everybody wanders around in the samsara together anyway. So, but human beings are only a bit more dignified than dogs in this very special sense that they can be enlightened in this lifetime. Dogs cannot, because they are not capable of conceptual understanding. But I don't think that can be attached too much importance because in the end, both human beings and dogs, according to Buddhism, wander around. They die and they are born again anyway. So, if there is a way to talk about bioethical issues without mentioning the concept of human dignity, if it becomes too cumbersome, then I think we can just get rid of the concept. You know, that's my understanding right now.
May I understand?
Yes, Professor. So last comment. Okay.
Thank you for the presentation. I'd like to comment the general statement or observation about bioethics. On the 2005 declaration, they had a very strong discussion about the term bioethics. Somebody that is thinking about biotechnologies. And the declaration assumed that it's more than think just biotechnologies. So include all the issues. I have to test here, but since it's the last comment, I would suggest everybody read this part that they assume that it's a new field of thinking about all the reflections related to life. Not, the bio would be life, ethics on life, not ethics on biotechnology. Some countries believe that bioethics is just thinking about technology frontiers. But on the declaration, they start to discuss the declaration in 2003 with Leonardo de Castro, that is from Philippines, so sorry. I know him since 2000. And Leonardo wrote the first draft with Dr. Benguer. So everybody started to discuss this draft, and then 2005 they finished the draft. And one of the biggest discussions were about this bioethics. So some countries assume that it's just restricted for biotechnology, but we should assume that it would be more than this. It may be include science ethics. So I agree more that bioethics more it's kind of not more than, but bioethics include all the things, and also the ethics on science, the ethics on the social science, the ethics and whatever you think about life. Thank you.
Thank you. In that sense, bioethics is everything because, life is everywhere, right? I think we have to be careful not to let the discussion here slip into kind of, disagreements about how to use words only. I don't think that is kind of productive enough. But because we need to understand how things go, right? I think we agree on that. So there are some questions, like I said, whether it is ethical to throw chemical compounds into the toilet. In a way, that is a bioethical issue because chemical compounds, they are dangerous. And once they get into the sewage system, in Thailand, they go to the canals. And then people, go into the canal for whatever reason, or dogs, and they get poisoned by the compounds. That is a bioethical issue. In that sense, everything can become part of bioethics. Yes, but if you design a curriculum or a course on bioethics, you need to be like selective on what are the central issues. I don't disagree with you. That's the short answer.
Thank you very much, Soraj. And I think, as Soraj said, we can get into playing with words if we're defined by terms. And I think that was also some of the issue of earlier in the discussion. Dan, you mentioned you're afraid of what is geoengineering. Different people have different ideas of different terms. People want ethics of science, some people think it's bioethics, some people think it's all love of life, some people think it's all nothingness or all everything. And information ethics and privacy, some of those principles can be applied to other areas, like when you apply principles of computer privacy to genomic privacy, then genomic privacy clearly we think is bioethics, information privacy and computer privacy is not in a narrow sense, it's not bioethics, it is a computer ethics. But in a bigger sense, we're still applying ethical principles, and so maybe that's thank you, so an excellent presentation and good things. Well, I have a final test question for the youngest person here who did recently the genetics. What's the mutation rate of human cells every generation? How many DNA will be changed? 1 in 3 million or 1 in 300,000 base sequences?
I'm sure it's less than 3 million, but I don't know it off the top of my head.
Okay, and we have 3 billion, 2 billion base pairs.
Yeah.
So,
2
sorry,
billion.
2 billion,
1,000 billion.
1.8 billion.
Per generation.
No, in each cell, DNA. So if we change the genome, the germline, and we have a mutation rate of, let's say even conservatively, it's fixed to 1 in a million, but it's less, it is more than that. We already have 1,000 generated mutations, but actually between any two individuals, usually there's about 2 or 3 million base pairs difference. So actually the germline editing is not forever. It's for that cell, and once it reproduces, it already has thousands of mutations separate from the next one. So in our body, we're meant to be clonal, but actually we're not. Because every generation of reproduction...
The difference between intentionally doing something and then nature takes its course.
Yes, but even if we change the germline, it's not fixed. Nothing is fixed in nature. It's all changing. So
But it's changing in a different way than if nobody has done anything.
Yes, the best laid plans of mice and men. So we're going to close. Thank you very much, Soraj. We'll continue our discussions on the meaning of life tomorrow.